Welcome to today's Explainer. We're about to unpack the massive ambition, the frankly chaotic execution, and the incredibly tragic end of a historic 1988 DC Comics event. We're looking at a story that promised to completely change the very fabric of human evolution in the comic book universe, only to be, well, completely derailed by behind-the-scenes drama and an unimaginably grim finale.
Okay, let's dive into this. How exactly did a superhero team that was supposed to literally lead humanity into the future practically vanish into obscurity? We're exploring a massive central mystery today. We've got this incredibly hyped super team that was given the ultimate cosmic mandate, yet ended up entirely broken apart and forgotten. To understand how they met such a dark end, we've got to go back to how they were created in the first place.
Part 1, an unprecedented comic event.
So this event was conceptualized back in 1986 by writers Steve Englehart and editor Andy Helfer, way before the real-world Millennium was even a popular topic. And to really grasp the scale here, just think about this number, 45. That is the staggering amount of tie-in issues that spanned across the entire DC universe just to support this one event. I mean, from Batman to Wonder Woman to The Flash, almost every single major ongoing series had to coordinate their storylines to reflect the events of Millennium. It was like a giant puzzle requiring complex coordination across numerous creative teams just to make sure the narrative held together.
But the ambition definitely didn't stop at the tie-ins. The core Millennium Limited series was published weekly over exactly 8 weeks. Now, today, weekly series happen occasionally, but back in 1988, this was a massive departure for an American comic series. Steve Englehart essentially had to coordinate a weekly main story that continuously played off of those 45 different tie-in books releasing simultaneously. It's wild to even think about.
Part 2. The Millennium Plot.
All right, so the in-universe plot kicks off when the Guardians of the Universe announce they're leaving our dimension. But before they go, one Guardian named Harupa Handu-Hu and his Zamoran mate Nadia Saphir travel to Earth. Their grand plan? To select 10 regular humans to become an immortal race known as the New Guardians. But, of course, an event this big needs a massive threat, right? Enter the Manhunters. These robotic first creations of the Guardians launch a massive conspiracy because they absolutely under no circumstances want this new race of immortals to succeed. They use stolen data gathered by Harbinger to secretly pose as the close friends and relatives of Earth's greatest heroes, basically trying to foil the Guardians' plan from the inside out.
Part 3. Forging the New Guardians.
Now, what's really interesting about this is looking at who actually made up the team. Gathering this group of chosen humans was incredibly messy. Some heroes, like the Floronic Man, Tom Kalmaku, and Harbinger, flat out refused to call and walked away. Actually, scratch that, Harbinger literally split into 20 bodies and flew off. But for those who did accept, the transformation was radical. Harupa and Nadia ultimately sacrificed their own lives to forcibly evolve these humans. We see Zhang Po becoming Gloss, connected to the dragon lines of Feng Shui, Takayo Yakata becomes Ram, interfacing with electronics, Gregorio de la Vega becomes the magic-wielding Extraño, Celia Windward becomes Jet, manipulating Earth-based powers, and Betty Clawman, she literally sinks into and merges with the Earth itself.
We really have to pause and highlight a major progressive milestone achieved right here. Extraño, Gregorio de la Vega, becomes the first openly gay hero in comics. Steve Englehart intentionally built this team to be a true cross-section of humanity, representing different nations, backgrounds, and identities for the new age. He reasoned that once this barrier was broken, the industry would naturally follow suit with more representation in the years to come. It was a real game-changer.
Part 4. Behind-the-scenes drama.
So the newly formed New Guardians spun off into their own ongoing series, but their on-page triumph immediately crashed into out-of-universe reality. And this brilliantly illustrates the core conflict that killed the book right out of the gate. Englehart's intended vision was for the New Guardians to represent a massive progressive advance in comics. He planned to explore highly realistic and mature themes. We're talking sex, drugs, and complex politics. But colliding right into that was the editorial mandate. According to Englehart, despite prior promises, editorial heavily interfered, suddenly enforcing roadblocks and completely refusing to allow these mature themes into the book.
The sheer frustration of this creative clash is best summed up by Englehart himself. He stated, quote, "I got a promise from the highest powers at DC that I could do sex, drugs, and politics unhindered. I went to the man who'd given me the promise, and he reneged, so I walked away." End quote. Just like that, the architect of this massive, universe-spanning event completely abandoned his own ambitious project because the rug was pulled out from under him, leaving subsequent writers to scramble.
Part 5. A dark, abrupt end.
Let's move to see how this builds, or rather how fast this whole thing collapses. Look at this timeline. January 1988, the Millennium event launches with massive fanfare. But by 1989, the spin-off is heavily censored, loses its creator, and is swiftly canceled after just 12 issues. Without Englehart, the book had to awkwardly pivot away from its big themes, two evolving beings on an isolated island, and the ultimate, final, grim demise of the team's legacy was quietly tucked away a few years later in the pages of Green Lantern issues 32 and 33.
In those pages of Green Lantern, we get a truly tragic climax. The island where the new Guardians and their newly evolved Chosen are living is suddenly attacked by a dark, consuming, worm-like force known as entropy. By the time Hal Jordan arrives to help, he finds the entire island completely swallowed by this spreading black gunk. Everything the team had tried to build was literally being eaten alive.
The dark irony here is just palpable. The beings on that island, the ones who are explicitly meant to be the next true step in human evolution, are quickly broken apart. As entropy moves to attack the Green Lantern homeworld of Oa, the Chosen realize the only way to stop this dark force is to willingly sacrifice their own lives. In a flash, the very future of human evolution is completely wiped from existence just to save Oa.
So the crucial point is this. After the dust settles, the surviving new Guardians are left with absolutely nothing. Entropy is defeated, and they're alive, but they're chosen. Their entire reason for existing are dead. Having entirely lost their cosmic purpose and their mission, the remaining team simply gives up. Without anyone left to protect, they just quietly disband and fade away into the background of comic book history.
It leaves us with a fascinating, lingering question. Does editorial interference ruin comic history by stifling creative vision? Or were the New Guardians simply a failed experiment that didn't fit the era they were published in? Looking back, this 1988 event perfectly mirrors modern struggles we still see today, between corporate mandates and a creator's bold vision. It's a stark reminder of how fragile even the most ambitious storytelling can be. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredibly fascinating piece of publishing history in today's Explainer.